Association as we've had over the last few days. Today we will be completing the final day of the Srimad Bhagavatam overview, and we also have a very special presentation this afternoon, and that is the recognition of the devotees who participated in the Summer Book Marathon for 2022. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Well, devotees, how nice, how wonderful to be with you again. It seems like just yesterday that we were together. Anyway, yes. Okay. Well, let me just tell you what we're doing, what I'm going to be presenting this afternoon or now. This morning and this afternoon, is starting on Wednesday. Yes, starting on Wednesday. Right here, we started a seminar. We called it The Essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what it involved was that we were to go through, right here, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Would you believe? The whole Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes. Now, unfortunately, the weather, it was Lord Indra again, you know. You remember Govardhan Leela. You remember that. Lord Indra just, he got carried away with himself. And there was, at least on Thursday, there was heavy rain. There was quite heavy on Thursday. And on Friday, so on Thursday, we did not have the seminar here, but rather we continued with it just online. And as a result, I think many of the devotees who would have attended in person here or who did attend in person on Wednesday night, they missed out, because I remember even on Wednesday night we had about 60 people online, I think, something like that, and plus maybe 50 here. But on Thursday night, when we were just online, we had, again, I think it was sort of maybe 70, so maybe a few of you who were here in person on Wednesday night. Maybe a few of you, I guess, were online on Thursday. And then the same problem on Friday. The rain, it wasn't that bad really, but the devotees felt concerned, and so they felt we should not do it here on Friday, so we didn't. We were just online. And I apologize to any of you who missed out. The recordings are there, of course. So on Wednesday night, we covered the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The whole thing, can you believe it? The whole thing. And most of the second canto. And on Thursday night, we did the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth cantos. in one night. How's that? Maybe it's a world record. And on Friday night, what did we do? The 7th, 8th, and 9th cantos. So today, what's left is the 10th, 11th, and 12th cantos. And normally devotees think that, Bhagavatam's such a big book that how on earth are we going to read this whole thing? But we're going to finish 10th, 11th, and 12th cantos right now. Just, in very summarized form. But we'll definitely cover the main points. It's all very extremely interesting, it really is. So that's what we're doing. Today, the complete 10th canto, in essence, just very abbreviated, but the main parts, and then the 11th and 12th cantos. So there we go. All right, that's what our program is. And so now we will call on His grace. You see over there, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, who will lead us in Jai Radha Madhava and a little Hare Krishna Kirtan. But I think he needs a microphone. I see one standing back there looking lonely. And I see here my old friend Shanae. Haribol Shanae. Haribol, yes. Radha, Madhava, Jaya, Kunjabi. Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Sundar ki, Sankirtan Yagya ki, Go Premanande. All glories to their Selma devotees. All glories to their Selma devotees. All glories to their Selma devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so devotees, here we go. Srimad Bhagavatam, an overview of the 10th, 11th and 12th cantos. So first of all, the 10th canto is the most famous part of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam because it's, you could say, the biography of Krishna. From right before his birth or appearance till kind of towards, at least towards, his leaving this world. The 11th canto, which of course we're going to go on to shortly, is there are two main parts to the 11th canto, and one of them is the description of the departure of Lord Krishna from this world. It's quite a story, so we'll go through that shortly. But here now, that's the 11th canto. Here now is the 10th canto. There are 90 chapters. 90 chapters. It's really extensive. There are 4, like, I don't know if they're 1,000-page books, but I'm sure they're good 700 or 800 pages, 4 books, making up just the 10th canto alone. So it's very substantial. So, but there are 3 sections in the 10th canto. First section is from verse 1, chapter 1 to chapter 40, and that is Krishna in Vrindavan. Then from chapter 41 to chapter 50, that is Krishna in Mathura. Then from chapter 50, sort of part way through chapter 50, through chapter 90, that's Krishna in Dwaraka. Yes, so each section is really kind of separate. They're all separate from each other. Krishna in Vrindavan means basically Krishna's childhood pastimes. And Krishna in Mathura is Krishna as, first of all, Krishna kills Kamsa. That's pretty dramatic. And then Krishna meets Kubja. That's very interesting. And other things, anyway, we'll explain when we get there. Then Krishna in Dwaraka is Krishna as a prince. In Mathura, he's also like a prince. Well, he is a prince, actually. So Krishna in Dwaraka, Krishna as a prince, as a householder, married person. Krishna had 16,108 wives. And as we say when we sometimes attend weddings and we're asked to say a few words, then we tell the husband, the groom, don't try to compete with Krishna in any regard, but definitely not that regard. Just one. Just stick with one. But Krishna, 16,108 wives, and he expanded himself into separate forms for each, living 24/7 with each wife. And it's said that in Kali Yuga, the time we're in now, this epoch, in Kali Yuga, a man will be considered expert if he can keep one wife happy. I will not ask ladies if your husbands how they're doing in that regard, but anyway, that's what they say. But Krishna had 16,108 wives, and they were rarely happy. Each wife had 10 children. So that's quite a family, isn't it? What's that? That's 160,000, 161,000 children. There you go. I met once one of our friends, a supporter of our movement in Centurion between Joburg and Pretoria, and he had 2 wives at the same time, and they were living together, and they got on, and a total of 32 children. Anyway, let's not get diverted. So here we are. Chapter 1 to chapter 40, Krishna in Vrindavan. So, there's the appearance of Krishna that's very special. Krishna is the Supreme Lord. He was in the womb of Devaki. He was actually, you could say, physically within her womb. But then, when he came out, he didn't come out in any of the usual ways, but he came out fully dressed and with like a crown, necklaces, bangles, earrings, nose rings, toe rings, navel rings, what else, other rings you can have. Anyway, all those sorts of things. Yeah, he just stepped out. He just stepped out. And as soon as he stepped out, he started speaking, not in any type of baby language, but he started speaking in Sanskrit, perfect Sanskrit. And then, of course, he appeared, or was born, but we say appeared, in a prison. His parents were imprisoned, but then the father, Vasudeva, managed to escape and take baby Krishna across the Yamuna River, because this is happening in Mathura. If you're familiar with the geography of India, North India a bit, Mathura's right on the river Yamuna, the river's on the eastern side. So he took Krishna across the river to Gokula, which is across the river on the eastern side. And Krishna had his childhood pastimes there. And then they moved to near current-day Vrindavan. Then they moved to current-day Nandagram. Yeah, and that's where Krishna spent his childhood. So the main theme, you could say, or the main type of relationship that Krishna was involved in, not the only, but the main, was parental relationship. He was with devotees who were either his parents or the relatives and associates, contemporaries of his parents. They're all adults. And Krishna was there as a child. So the thing is, and it's such an important point to try to get one's head around, although it may not be so easy, is that in Vrindavan, Krishna appears in his supreme feature, highest feature. He is God. He appears in many different features, like as Lord Ram, Lord Ramachandra. He's a king. He's actually a king. Yes, so he dresses in that way, he conducts himself in that way, and he actually rules. But but Ram is not the complete manifestation of God. At least Krishna, or Lord Ram, who is Krishna, is not displaying his complete character. Only part of it. That's the thing, that's the difference. But Krishna in Vrindavan is as a child, and, well, Lord Ram, in his relationships, even with Sita, his wife, her attitude towards him was extremely respectful, not as intimate as, you could say, the typical husband-wife relationships that we're all familiar with nowadays, where it's very, very intimate relationship, but she was extremely respectful to him because there he is displaying his kingly nature as the ruler and the Lord, the master. And like Hanuman's famous, of course, for his love of Lord Ram and being such a great servant of Lord Ram. But when they embraced at the end, after, the whole thing about rescuing Sita and then returning to Ayodhya, then Ram felt so happy, so pleased with Hanuman. He embraced him. But Hanuman felt embarrassed because this is the Lord embracing me. Wow. So he felt very embarrassed. Who am I to just embrace the Lord? That's an intimate type of relationship. So there the Lord is displaying himself more or less as God. And he's being treated like that. But in Vrindavan, no, it's different. In Vrindavan, he was his parents, once he reached Vrindavan, That's Nanda and Yashoda. And they took him just to be their son. That's all. And he took himself just to be their son. And he acted like that, and they acted like that, because they're actually in a parental mood in relation to the Lord. And they're in a mood of parental love. And they're not seeing him as God or the King or the Lord or the Master. So that sort of relationship within Vrindavan, a loving relationship, intimate, very, very close, loving relationship, that is higher than a relationship with God in which he is displaying himself as God. And it's so obvious you cannot overlook the fact that he's God. But there in Vrindavan, he was just presenting himself as a little boy. And so they just loved him because he was the most lovable little boy. You know, we all know what children are like. Where did Shanae go? Anyway, she went. Oh, there she is. Haribol. Kitika. Yeah. So, children, sometimes they're mischievous. I will not ask Shanae if she's ever mischievous. Never, I'm sure. She's a good girl. But other children are mischievous. Sometimes we hear. And sometimes, you know, the parents get angry with their children. It happens. And, you know, we don't support it at all, but sometimes parents get so angry they hit their children. Like I say, we really don't support that at all. There are other ways of correcting children. But Prabhupada would say, when Krishna, as a child, when Krishna was good, he was good. And when Krishna was bad, he was good. They just loved him. They just loved him. He was so lovable. He would sometimes, yes, some dear devotee's telephone is, maybe it's Krishna. Maybe not. So, even Krishna, sometimes he would steal the butter. Mainly the butter. Sometimes he'd steal other things, yogurt, and sometimes some other things. And from other people's houses, because the ladies, they would churn yogurt actually into butter, not cream as nowadays that's what they make butter out of generally, but out of yogurt, so it's not so fatty. That was, so they really put their hearts into it. And they were thinking, I wish Krishna would have this butter. But they couldn't just give it to Krishna because their husbands would have been upset, because that was their means of livelihood. They would trade butter. They didn't grow vegetables. They just produced dairy products. They trade those dairy products for vegetables and grains and whatever else they needed. So, you know, they didn't want to lose their butter. But so Krishna, because so much love had gone into the butter, Krishna wanted to taste the love, but they couldn't give it to him, the housewives, so he would steal it. Yes, because he felt, Krishna is addicted to love. Yes. So he had to get their love, so he'd steal it. But then the ladies, sometimes they would act like they're upset because they have to, their husbands have to be convinced that their wives are not just giving away their butter. So sometimes they'd act like they're angry. And they come and complain to Mother Yashoda that, look at this, your boy stole our butter again. And Mother Yashoda would raise her hand like she's going to smack him. And she would tell him, okay, I will sort him out. But they would say, no, don't do that. And Mother Yashoda would say, well, don't worry, I'll make sure he doesn't come to your house again to steal your butter. And the ladies would say, it's okay, let him come. Let him come. Because they weren't really angry. So like that, his friends, because they had loving relationships as friends, he was just their best friend, better than their best friend. And the gopis, the cowherd girls, he was, you could say, like their boyfriend. Yeah, and they didn't see him as God, this big, important person. They saw him just as the most beautiful and sweet and nice and mischievous young boy of their age group. So therefore the pastimes in Vrindavan, they're very special like that. They're really saturated with love, very intimate, very personal love. That's the main characteristic. Of course, Krishna, during his childhood, he killed many demons. Yes. The first demon was Putana. She was a giant witch, the real thing. And she was giant, a few kilometers tall. But she transformed herself, she had that power, into like a very beautiful young, kind of early 20s age young lady, and came in to where Krishna was, and she looked very beautiful, but she also looked very sweet and nice and saintly. Yeah, so they let her go in and be with Krishna. Even though they didn't know who she was just a stranger. So she came in and she was going to breastfeed Krishna, because that was the practice in those days, and even up until recently, maybe in some places it still happens. All the ladies who are like in the same age group as the mother of a newly born child, they would all come and breastfeed the child. Yes. And the child would be breastfed up till school age, even like 7, 8, even up to 10 years old. The boys at least would be breastfed. And they say that if boys particularly are breastfed, up to an age like that, like at least school type age, then when they're mature, physically mature, then they will not be so, like overly excited about women. And, well, you know what happens. Even in India now, there's all the raping going on. It's just crazy. And here, yeah. So like this, boys become more stable as they grow up. So, yeah. Krishna, Putana came to offer, to breastfeed him, but her breast was poisoned. And therefore she was going to kill him. That was her idea. But he accepted that motherly type of gesture. She looked at him initially and thought, wow, what a beautiful child. And she actually had some motherly feelings for a couple of seconds. And then her mood, like, I'm going to kill him, just took over again. But Krishna accepted that little motherly mood. And even though he killed her, but he gave her a position in the kingdom of God as a type of mother, as a nanny, actually. Yeah, nanny is a type of mother, one of the 7 types of mothers. So, yeah, and devotees, when you go to the kingdom of God, if you go to Goloka Vrindavan, you may meet Putana. She's there as a nanny. Others are uncles and aunts. There's a whole circle of parental type devotees. So anyway, Krishna killed Putana. He killed Shakatasura, was the second one that's recorded, Trinavarta, and so on. Then there was the Damodar Leela. Krishna was naughty and broke some pots which had butter and other dairy products in them. And Mother Yashoda came and saw this mess. And there was Krishna eating butter. Well, he had stopped eating butter right then. He was feeding the butter to the monkeys. But they had had so much butter from him, they were refusing the butter. And Mother Yashoda came. Krishna was angry, inverted commas, but in terms of the exchanges of love, as happens, children sometimes get a bit shirty with their parents briefly. And because she was breastfeeding him, a pot of milk started boiling over inside. She just put him down just like that. Just like that. Suddenly he's lying there and he got upset. So now he's feeding the butter to the monkeys. They're refusing. And his mother Yashoda came in and Krishna said, just see, because he's sort of trying to get back at her. It's all very transcendental. It's not ordinary. And Krishna said, just see, your butter is so bad, even the monkeys won't eat it. And then Mother Yashoda decided, right, that's it. I've got to discipline this boy, teach him a lesson. Otherwise, he's going to grow up bad. Now he's stealing butter. In the future, he will steal motor cars or buffalo carts, probably. And people, he'll become a criminal. They'll lock him up. She's thinking like this in a motherly way. And people will think, what sort of hopeless mother did this fellow have? Couldn't train him to become a proper human being. So she tied him up. Anyway, you all know the story. It's a long story. But these sorts of pastimes were going on. Yeah. So then, well, here's an interesting little bit of information which you wouldn't know, I'm assuming. First of all, he lived in the Gokula Mahavan area, which is still there, for 3 years and 4 months. Then he went to what is the current day Vrindavan area for another 3 years and 4 months. Then he went to the Nandagram area, it's about an hour's drive, by motor car. It's still within the greater Vrindavan area, and he lived there for another 3 years and 4 months, give or take a bit. So, give or take a bit. Then at the age of 10 years and 7 months, he left and went to Mathura. Yeah. And the actual day is the 13th lunar day of the dark fortnight. Dark fortnight means in a lunar month. Lunar month starts with the full moon. So that fortnight is the light fortnight, and then it goes down to no moon, and then it comes up again to the end of the lunar month when it's full moon. But from the dark night, no moon, it's called that fortnight is the dark fortnight, they say. So the 13th lunar day of the dark fortnight of the month of Chaitra, he went to Mathura, and the next day killed Kamsa. So, an interesting little point. That day, the 13th lunar day of the dark fortnight of the lunar month of Chaitra, is the 13th day after Gaur Purnima. 13th day. So you can calculate. That's the day Krishna left Vrindavan. Anyway, there you go. So then Krishna went to Mathura. And there's famous pastime when Krishna entered Mathura. Of course, he ended up killing Kamsa. But before that, he was moving around Mathura. And Lord Chaitanya, actually in Chaitanya Bhagavat, explains about this pastime. Krishna's moving around Mathura with his cowherd boyfriends. Moving around Mathura. And Lord Chaitanya, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Lord Chaitanya is explaining this. It's in the Bhagavatam. So they met a washerman who had a whole big basket full of clothes belonging to the king, Kamsa. And Krishna, in his, you know what they say, boys will be boys. Particularly when they get to that age. Effectively, even though he's 10 years and 7 months, effectively he had aged to the point of a 15-year-old. Yeah. So, boys will be boys. And he was really one of the boys going for it. And he saw this washerman with all these really good, like the best clothes, the king's clothes. They're the best. And he walked up to the washerman and said, "Hey, wouldn't you like to give us cowherd boys some of those clothes?" While nodding his head to influence the man to say, yes. But the washerman, he was too proud and arrogant because he was the king's washerman. So he refused in a really sort of, condescending way. And he said, "Well, these are the king's clothes, so I can't give you any. But you're just cowherd boys. Why don't I know what you should do if you need some clothes? Go to the forest and just take some bark off the trees and use the bark for clothes, which, it means it's like pauper's clothes, tree bark. So Krishna felt insulted. And Krishna, therefore, gave him what we call in Chatsworth, because I am a Chatsworthian or a Chatsworth resident, Krishna gave him what we call a what's happened. You heard of that? What's happened? It means a good slap. But Krishna, don't underestimate Krishna. He gave him a slap, and the washerman's head fell off, right off. And that was the end. Goodbye, washerman. So Lord Chaitanya is explaining this to some of his associates. And Lord Chaitanya makes a really interesting point. He says, that washerman had performed severe austerities for many lifetimes so he could see God, which some people do, even to this day, in India at least. Severe austerities for many lifetimes, just so he could see God. And then he saw God. But because doing austerities hardens the heart, therefore when he saw God, he had no devotion, he had no love, he couldn't recognize the Lord, so he offended the Lord. Yeah. So anyway, then Krishna killed Kamsa, and just an interesting point about that is that when he killed, when he and Balaram together entered the wrestling arena, then different people saw him in different ways, because different people have different attitudes, different perspectives on God. Some people, like those ladies in Vrindavan, they saw Krishna, he's God, but they saw him as little boy who needs to be looked after and protected and trained up. So when Krishna and Balaram entered the arena, the ladies, the mothers, they saw Krishna and Balaram like these innocent little boys who are going to fight these huge professional wrestlers. And they felt really bad. This is just too unfair. But the young girls who were there, like teenage girls, when they saw Krishna and Balaram enter the arena, they saw them as the most handsome, attractive young teenage boys. The wrestlers, when they saw Krishna and Balaram, they saw them as death personified. Yeah. The impersonalists who think that we're all spirit souls and spirit soul is just like a little light. When Krishna and Balaram entered the arena, they didn't even see Krishna and Balaram. They saw these two lights moving across the arena. And then there were some, Buddha had not appeared. Buddha's philosophy is called Shunyavad, technically. Shunya meaning zero, means he says nothing exists. We don't exist. Nothing exists. There is nothing. Shunya vad meaning knowledge. So there were some like predecessors of the Buddhists. The philosophy of Buddhism was already existing, and the people who are following it, they were called Shanak Vijnanavadis. And when Krishna and Balaram entered the arena, they saw nothing. They saw nothing. Yeah. So this is all in terms of people's attitudes, towards God. So anyway, Krishna then killed Kamsa and freed his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. Then Krishna moved around Mathura, but he met Kubja, and you'd have to be a little familiar with the Bhagavatam to know of Kubja. She was a young woman, she was a hunchback who used to provide scented oils for the king, for Kamsa. Krishna walked up to her, took her cheeks like that, and just lifted her up. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai. Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Sundar Ki Jai. I'm meant to go on for another half hour. We'll try and finish the rest of the Bhagavatam. But then now, and he transformed her into a beautiful young girl. Instead of, this real hunchback, deformed person. And she saw Krishna, who had done this amazing thing, and she became attracted to him in a lusty way. Yeah, because her heart was not pure, as with the gopis. So she invited him to visit her in her place. And Krishna went. And she, by Krishna's association, she became completely purified and came to the level of the gopis. In Gopal Champu of Srila Jiva Goswami, there's a very interesting discussion between some of the gopis. How did Kubja come from this point of being, just like a lusty woman who just wants to get her hands on some good-looking young man, to a pure devotee, completely free from such tendencies even. Yeah. So, one of Madhukanta, who's one of the reciters of Gopal Champu, he explains, and you'll have to think about this. It's very interesting, but you'll have to think about it, and I suspect some of you still may not get it. But Madhukanta, to explain, says, I consider the situation with Kubja as follows. If a poor person is seen by a very powerful, merciful person, the merciful person and his powers become controlled by the poor person. Do you get that? The poor, in other words, the very powerful and very wealthy and very merciful person, when he sees the poor person, just becomes overwhelmed. And then the poor person gains a type of control over that powerful, wealthy, and very merciful person. So the merciful person's merciful powers become controlled briefly by the poor person. So he continues, curious for a moment, Krishna glanced at Kubja, and thus she attained the power to become similar to the gopis. Do you get that? Or is it a bit... Anyway, think about it. It's really interesting. So then Krishna was educated, so to speak. He learned everything in 64 days from Sandipani Muni. And then in chapter 50, Krishna goes to Dwaraka and lived there. He married 16,108 princesses. They became his queens, and he manifested separate palaces for each of them. And Narada Muni one day visited. It's described in the Bhagavatam. And he went from palace to palace. He'd heard about this, and he wanted to see it. Can it be real? And he saw in the different palaces Krishna doing different things. In one palace, he's playing with his children. In another palace, he's joking with his wife. In another palace, he's talking about, financial matters, as householders do, and so on. In all these palaces, he saw Krishna doing different things at the same time. Yeah. So then there was the meeting with the inhabitants of Vrindavan in Kurukshetra. That's described. They met Krishna again after having not seen him. The period of time is around 60 years. They didn't see Krishna, but they met him again in Kurukshetra, north of Vrindavan, north of Delhi, about 250 kilometers. And there, Krishna's 16,108 queens, when they saw the love exchange between Krishna and particularly the gopis, they couldn't believe it. Because Krishna in Dwaraka, he manifests himself differently from in Vrindavan, because he's a prince. So therefore, even though there's a conjugal relationship, but there's also more of the element of awe and reverence. They have more of an understanding that Krishna's God than in Vrindavan. So the queens wanted someone to instruct them and help them understand what was it like in Vrindavan. What were the relationships with Krishna like? So, but who's going to tell them? And then they realized Rohini, the mother of Balaram, she had been in Vrindavan. Although she is a wife of Vasudeva, who is Krishna's father in Mathura, so she's in that group. But she had been in Vrindavan while Vasudeva was imprisoned. So then Rohini explained to the queens what it was like in Vrindavan, the loving exchanges. And Krishna was wondering, it's one thing if you got one wife and she goes off with her girlfriends or, goes to the Pick and Pay and doesn't tell you, whatever. And then you wonder, hey, where's my wife gone? And she won't answer her phone. But it's another thing if you got 16,108 wives and you can't find any of them at all. Something's really happening. And so Krishna went looking for them, and sure enough, he saw them hidden away in some secret place. Because Rohini was afraid, if Krishna hears me talk about what it was like in Vrindavan, he will leave Dwaraka, because she was living in Dwaraka. at that time, and we'll lose Krishna's association. So I'll tell you what it was like, but we have to get away from Krishna, make sure he doesn't see or hear anything. But Krishna came and saw and heard. And as he was listening, he became more and more just enraptured and overcome, remembering Vrindavan, what it was like that Krishna transformed into the form of Jagannath. Big round eyes, like wow, and big smile. Oh, it's amazing. That's Jagannath. And Balaram came, same thing happened to him. And then Subhadra in the middle there came, and same thing happened to her. Otherwise, they were in, you could say, human forms. Yeah. But when they heard about Vrindavan, they transformed like that. So yeah, so that happened when they all met in Kurukshetra. Yeah. And then, then there's in the second to last chapter of the 10th canto, two very important pastimes are described in detail. One is Bhrigu Muni proving that Vishnu is higher than Brahma and Shiva. Because Bhrigu is one of the sons of Lord Brahma, as Lord Shiva is. So, it's a long story, but first of all, he went to visit Lord Brahma, who's his father. And in Vedic culture, when you meet your father, particularly first time in the day, you know what you must do. You know what you must do. You must bow down. Yeah. And I've seen in India, in some of the more cultured families, the children doing like that. But you must bow down before your father. But Bhrigu Muni, who is one of Brahma's sons, just walked in and said the Sanskrit equivalent of, "Hi, Dad, how you doing? All right." And Lord Brahma was not impressed, and he was going to kill him. But Saraswati, his wife, pacified him. He's overexcited. He got carried away. So don't kill him. So Brahma didn't kill him. So he went to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, of course, he associates with ghosts and hobgoblins. And I heard that he comes to South Africa and associates with Tikalosh also. Out of his mercy, to deliver, because Lord Chaitanya's Patita Pavan, the deliverer of the fallen. Patita Pavan is also a name of Lord Shiva. Yeah, it's also a name of Lord Shiva. He delivers the most fallen. I mean, those like the ghosts and hobgoblins and Tikalosh, I believe they're pretty fallen. I don't know if any of you have met one. But he makes them into devotees. Can you imagine? Devotee Tikaloshes. Yeah. So, and he was covered in the ashes of cremated human bodies and cobra and scorpions on his body, and pretty extreme. And so Bhrigu, of course Bhrigu understands. He's his brother, and he knows who is Lord Shiva and how he lives and how he feels. But just to test him, when Lord Shiva came up, because they're equals, they're brothers, so equals embrace. You bow down before seniors. Equals you embrace. So Lord Shiva came forward, "Oh, my brother," to embrace him. And Brigu jumped back. "Get away, look at you, you filthy creature. Oh, no, don't touch me." And he explained, the different reasons. And Lord Shiva was going to kill him. Yeah. But Parvati told Shiva, "Just relax, he's your brother." And so he didn't kill him. Then he went to visit Lord Vishnu. And he walked up to Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu was in trance, yoga nidra, with Lakshmi, his wife, massaging his feet. And Bhrigu Muni walked up to him and just kicked him in the chest. Bang! And, Lord Vishnu's in trance. Suddenly, whoa, what on earth happened? And then he understood what happened. But the way he reacted, Bhrigu Muni understood he's on a much higher level than even Brahma and Shiva. I mean, they're already on very high levels, but he's much higher. Because Lord Vishnu said, "Oh, my dear Bhrigu Muni, I hope you didn't hurt your soft lotus foot on my hard chest. I'm so sorry, I guess I got in your way or something." And Bhrigu's just astonished. And then Lord Vishnu said, "Thank you so much for touching my chest with your lotus foot and leaving some of your dust on my chest. Now my wife Lakshmi, who until now will not come any closer to me than my feet, now she may embrace me. She's never done it before. So thank you, because she will want to get some of that dust." And Bhrigu Muni understood this Vishnu is just on a different level altogether. Then the second story is, we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, but it's the story of the one Brahmin couple in Dwaraka whose 10 children, one after another, when they were born, one after the other, were stolen by Mahavishnu. Yes, Mahavishnu. So one by one, this couple had a child, and within like a couple of minutes of the birth of the child didn't die, but suddenly the child was just not there. The child just vanished because Mahavishnu had stolen the child. And this happened for 9 children. Then the wife became pregnant for the 10th time, and Arjuna came forward and said, "Don't worry, I will protect this child." With his Gandiva bow, he was standing there. That let whoever come and try and steal this child, I'll kill them. And this child will live. Or, you'll keep this child, 10th child. So there he was. The child was born. And what happened? Take a guess. Nothing. The child lived for about half an hour. And Arjuna was thinking, just see. Whoever it was frightened because I'm here with my Gandiva bow. Then after half an hour, the child vanished, gone. And Arjuna had said, "I will save this child. If not, I'll build a fire, walk into it, sit down, and be burnt to death." So he started building a fire. And then Krishna came and said, wait a minute. Come with me. We'll get the children back. So they went to Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu was so happy to see Krishna. And Krishna said, "I want those 10 children back." And Mahavishnu said, sure, take them, and just gave them back. And Krishna asked, or Arjuna came with Krishna. One of them asked, why did you steal those children? And Mahavishnu said, because I wanted to see Krishna. That's why I stole the children. And Mahavishnu said, I know the Brahmins are very dear to Krishna. So when this Brahmin couple get really upset through losing their children, Krishna will then come to get them back, as he did. So I got to see him. So there you are, it's all finished. Take them back, because I got to see Krishna. There's a little complex explanation of this given by Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. And the first thing he says is that Mahavishnu says that I have the grammatical form of the verb, a little technical, is that I have been wanting to see, meaning for a long time, not like I wanted to see, like we're all here, we wanted to see the deities, there we go. But like, I have been wanting to see Krishna. In other words, Mahavishnu's not normally able to see Krishna. Yeah. And then the next point he makes is that Mahavishnu had to personally go and steal the children. None of his followers were powerful enough to like impose themselves on the devotees of Dwaraka. So he had to go himself. 10 times he went. 10 times he stole those children. So the question is, why didn't he just walk in? Krishna's there. Krishna was living there. Why didn't he just walk in if he wanted to see Krishna? But the point is, even Mahavishnu can't see Krishna. Yeah. So even though he was there, he was in Dwaraka, still he was not able to go and see Krishna. Then the next point is that Mahavishnu said, yes, I know the Brahmins are very dear to Krishna, and when this Brahmin family, they get upset, Krishna will come to pacify them, come and get their children back. So the next point is, why didn't Krishna do that with the first child? If it's the Brahmins, because they were super upset. Why didn't he just do it the first time? Or the second time? But he didn't. It was only the 10th time. But it wasn't just the 10th time. The point was, Arjuna, the devotee, was going to give up his life. And Krishna couldn't tolerate that. So in order to protect his devotee, Arjuna, therefore Krishna went. And Mahavishnu was able to see Krishna. And the ultimate conclusion is, only by the mercy of the devotee can even Mahavishnu see Krishna. Yeah. So what do you think of that? Think about it. It's pretty extraordinary. So now, devotees, bear with me. What shall we say? The night is young. Well, it's not even the night. So it's okay. We can take a little time for the 11th and 12th cantos. Yes, right. So what I want to do with the 11th canto, what we want to do with the 11th canto is just touch on two things. The main thing is the disappearance of Krishna. What happened was, well, this is discussed in the first chapter of the 11th canto, then the 6th chapter, then the 30th and 31st chapters of the 11th canto. So it's all broken up. In the first chapter, some of Krishna's children and grandchildren, well, there's a gathering of sages in Dwaraka, including Narada Muni. And Narada Muni, he's really one of the big sages. So there they are. Everyone's offering respects to them. And some of these young boys, Krishna's offspring, they decide to play a practical joke on the sages. So they dressed up Samba. Samba, I think he's one of the grandsons. Anyway, he's either grandson or son of Krishna. They dressed him up like a young lady and put like a pillow or something in to make him look like a pregnant young lady. And they went in front of the sages and Narada Muni himself and said, "Oh, sages," in a mischievous way, "what sort of child will this young lady give birth to?" And I think it was Narada Muni, but it was one of the sages who said, "This young lady will give birth to a lump of iron, which will be the cause of the destruction of the Yadu dynasty," means Krishna's family. Yeah. So the boys got really upset, really disturbed, because they knew when these people say things, they happen. And sure enough, just like, immediately after, Samba gave birth to a lump of iron. They didn't know what to do with it, so they went to the king. The king is not Krishna, he's one of the princes. He's a nephew of Ugrasena. Ugrasena was the king. So they went to Ugrasena and told him the story, and with this lump of iron said, "What do we do with this thing?" And Ugrasena said, "I think I know what you do. We will have it ground into powder and thrown into the sea, and it'll just, that'll be it." Yeah, so they did that. There was one last piece, like this size, which they couldn't file down any further. They just threw it out into the ocean. So that's the first part of the story. The second part of the story, that's in the first chapter. So the second part is that the Krishna wants to leave this world. He's finished his pastimes. The Battle of Kurukshetra finished before. Everything's finished. It's time to go. And he has to take his dynasty, his family with him. So how to do it? So he arranges that they all, like as usual, it's one of our many long stories, but abbreviating it a bit, he arranged that they all go, all the men of the Yadu dynasty, they went to a sacred place. It's called Prabhas Kshetra. It's near Dwaraka in Gujarat, on the coast. And they went there, and if you remember the history, there was an incident, it's in Mahabharata, where Krishna tells Duryodhana, the leader of the bad guys, and Yudhisthira, the leader of the good guys, that you want me to participate in this battle. It was just before the battle. Said, all right, one of you can choose. I will be on your side, but I won't fight. And the other side, you can have my whole army, and they will fight. So, long story. Krishna was lying, sleeping. It was whoever would see him the first thing the next morning. Krishna's lying on his back, sleeping transcendentally. Duryodhana is standing right by his head, thinking, I'll be the first one he sees, then I'll choose the army. Yudhisthira is at Krishna's feet. That's a devotee's position. Krishna's on his back. Krishna wakes up and lifts his head up, looking down his body, and sees Yudhisthira first. And Duryodhana thinks, oh no, he's going to choose Krishna's army who's going to fight, and I'll just be stuck with Krishna. But Yudhisthira chose Krishna. And Duryodhana thought, great. So most of them were killed in the battle, but not all. So after the battle, those who survived from Krishna's army, they went and lived in Dwaraka with Krishna. Some of them didn't fight, or some of them stayed with Krishna, like Satyaki, Krishna's general of his army, stayed with Krishna and fought against the Duryodhana and company. So there they were now at Prabhasa Kshetra, and Satyaki and those who were on Yudhisthira's side, Krishna's side, started making fun of those who were on the other side. That, yeah, you guys lost, look at you, what sort of warriors are you, ha, ha, ha. And so a fight developed. And they started picking like reeds that were growing and fighting with these reeds. But the reeds were metal because the powder from that iron block got washed up on the shore at Prabhas and grew into these reeds, metal reeds. So they just killed each other. 640 million of them. More in the Battle of Kurukshetra was 580 million. This is more than in the Battle of Kurukshetra. 640 million, all killed. All the men in the Yadu dynasty, all finished. Then Balaram decided that's it, I've had enough. And he just took off. He actually manifested an antashesh from his mouth and just took off back to the spiritual world. And then what about Krishna? Krishna was there, and Krishna survived that whole thing. Krishna went and sat down under a tree, and Uddhava came, and Krishna instructed Uddhava. And Maitreya came also, and he heard Krishna instruct Uddhava. But then one hunter came, named Jara. One hunter came, and he would hunt animals and fish. He caught a fish, and when he opened up the fish, he found this piece of metal in the stomach of the fish, because the fish had swallowed that last piece of metal, which they couldn't file down any further. So he made it into an arrowhead. And there's Krishna sitting behind the tree speaking to Uddhava and Maitreya. And the hunter came and saw his foot sticking out. and thought it's some sort of animal. And the Bhagavatam says he fired an arrow in the direction of Krishna's foot. And our acharyas make the point that the Bhagavatam does not say that the arrow struck Krishna's foot, because Krishna's transcendental and he's the supreme controller, and whoever died of an arrow hitting their foot, I don't think it's really happened. So he fired in the direction of Krishna's foot. And then he came around, and you may have seen that if you've got the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto there's a painting of Krishna there with 4 arms, with his conch, club, chakra, and lotus in personified forms as people standing around him. And the hunter Jara is offering his obeisances to Krishna and just begging Krishna to forgive him. So then Krishna returned to Dwaraka. Well, Krishna went back to Godhead, but he left a material form which was cremated in Dwaraka, just to satisfy the atheists and others who always thought, he's an ordinary person, he's not God. All these people who say he's God, they don't know what they're talking about. Just to keep them happy, Krishna left a material body which was cremated, but then Krishna just took off and flew through the universe and out of the universe and back to Goloka Vrindavan. Then, that's those chapters. I mean, there's a lot in the 11th canto. It's 31 chapters. But from chapter 7 to 29, it's Krishna's instructions to Uddhava, what they call the Uddhava Gita. And it is following on from the end of Bhagavad Gita, actually, and spoken directly by Krishna himself. So, you should read it, because there's all sorts of interesting things there which are not covered at all in Bhagavad Gita, like deity worship. Krishna talks about how to worship deities and all sorts of things which you don't find in Bhagavad Gita. There you go, devotees. And then finally, we've actually come to the end. And so the 12th canto, it talks about Kali Yuga, that in Kali Yuga, places of living are going to become like Phoenix. The Bhagavatam says. Anyway, you know what I mean. And the people will become like some of the people in Phoenix. The corner boys. Do they still have corner boys? What do you call them? High Chaparral. Okay. Yeah, they'll become these sort of semi-zombie dukkha smokers and people like that. Yeah. Kali Yuga. It'll become so bad that people will agree to marry just like that, just on the basis of physical appearance. They will have children just to eat them. Haribol. And so then at the end of Kali Yuga and at the end of 12th canto, Lord Kalki appears and just destroys everyone. Not everyone actually, but the vast, vast majority. Just destroys them. Yeah. And in the 12th canto, the snake bird comes and bites Parikshit, because that's what it's all about. Parikshit's going to die on the 7th day by the bite of a snake bird. So snake bird comes, but they won't let him in because they know what he's going to do. They won't let him in. But Kashyapa, one of the sages who was there, the snake bird, Takshaka, bribes him. So, in the 12th canto, you see the picture. There's Takshaka. He's bitten Parikshit. Parikshit's sitting there. His body is burst into flame. And Kashyapa is in the foreground with this little chest of gold. That's what Takshaka gave him, that, look the other way, I'm going to bite him. Yeah. So Parikshit dies, his body bursts into fire, because interesting, very little point, poison. He's a snake bird, but he's a snake. And so his bite is poisonous. It's poison which Parikshit dies from. But poison, the active element in poison is fire. So therefore Parikshit's body burst into flame. Yeah. Poison generally works through the action of fire overheating, the system overheating. So then we come to the end of Srimad Bhagavatam. And you know what I'm going to do, devotees? I am going to read the last few verses, the actual last few verses of the 12th canto, chapter 13. Chapter 13 is titled The Glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's basically what it is. It's just glorifying. Srimad Bhagavatam is like this, it's like that, it's so many things. Bhadra Purnima, you know about Bhadra Purnima. That verse is there. It's, verse 13. 12th canto, chapter 13, verse 13. If on the full moon day of the month of Bhadra, one places Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne and gives it as a gift, he will attain the supreme transcendental destination. But then it goes on a few more verses, and let's just see. This is, how many verses are there? 23. So verse 16, just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta, Krishna, the supreme among deities, and Lord Shambhu, Lord Shiva, the greatest of Vaishnavas. Vaishnav, this is the verse, Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. It goes on, and we come to the last three. I'll read the last three verses. I offer my humble obeisances to Sri Shukadev Goswami, the best of mystic sages, and a personal manifestation of the absolute truth. He saved Maharaj Parikshit, who was bitten by the snake of material existence. 22. O Lord of Lords, O Master, please grant us pure devotional service at your lotus feet, life after life. And then the actual last verse, let me read the Sanskrit. Nama Sankirtanam Yasya That's interesting, isn't it? Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanas Tam Namami Harim Param. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord, Hari, a name of Krishna. I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord, Hari, the congregational chanting of whose holy names destroys all sinful reactions, and the offering of obeisances unto whom relieves all material suffering. And thus ends the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ke. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ke. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ke. Go Premanande.